All right, we are here today. Welcome back to the Voices of E-commerce. I am with Christian Williams. Christian has a history of working in the Bay Area, building tools for eBay sellers. He even started his own company doing that. Was developing software at a Bitcoin tipping company, worked at Wikia. So if you remember our podcast with Aaron Drake, he had also worked there. In fact, he knows Christian. And now Christian is working at Airbnb as an engineering manager. So welcome to the show, Christian.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to do this.
Well, awesome. So I heard a little tidbit that you owned or I bought at one point a DeLorean in 2000 when you sold your company. Um, what did buying that DeLorean mean to you?
First of all, it's completely untrue that I bought a DeLorean. I've actually bought two DeLoreans. Well, when I was born at the tail end of 1978. So when Back to the Future came out in 1985, I was like 6 years old, and I saw the movie and I was blown away by the car specifically. And I told my dad they should really build a car like that. And he said, "Well, they did. It's a car." And like immediately, I just couldn't fathom why we didn't own that car, like why we would choose to buy a different car. And it just never made any sense to me that you wouldn't just buy a DeLorean. So I was just, it was the first thing that I became like really deeply obsessed with. And of course, the second I had any money at all, I ran and bought the first DeLorean that I saw, which was a train wreck. And then I spent the next 5 years learning why people don't just buy DeLoreans and drive them as their daily driver when they're 20 years old. Yeah.
So you don't still have that DeLorean then?
No, I sold that DeLorean and I promised myself that I would buy another one within 10 years. And I did. So I bought another one in 2015 and I still have it.
All right, nice.
And that one's a good car because I knew specifically what to look out for.
Yeah, right. All right, so that's so cool. As a child of the '80s, I love the DeLorean as well, and Back to the Future. Man, that was one of my favorite movies. Um,
Yeah.
so I hear you, man. So you've been doing this for quite a while then. So it sounds like you started in 1999, and it's now 2020.
Yeah.
How has the sophistication of web technologies changed in that time?
Oh, it's night and day. It's night and day. I mean, all the standards have developed and all the tooling has really developed. And there's this really great open source community of different projects. So if you want to start, a company, or if you want to start like if you want to build a website, for example, it used to be really, really hard. And now it's like everything is just sorted out for you. Like it's clear where you can go and host a site. It's clear what technologies you would use. It's clear how to get help with any problem that you encounter. All the IDEs, the software developer tools, um, they help you along. They show you when you've made errors. And that only really used to be true in compiled languages. But now for JavaScript, like at Airbnb, we use TypeScript, which helps identify any problems with variable typing. And the tools just help you so much now. And back then, some of it might be that I'm older now, but when I was 20 years old with my friends trying to work, it was like, it seemed like it was impossible to find answers to any of these problems. And now it just seems like such a connected community of people, and the tooling and the languages themselves are just so much better.
So
It's a great place. It's a great time to start now.
so did you actually do any development on Notepad or Notepad plus plus back in the day? Yeah.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd actually completely forgotten about that. I remember people used to be like really proud. There was this standard advertising unit size that was 88 pixels by 33 pixels. It was like a tiny little button. And they would have those for all sorts of things, like optimized for Netscape Navigator, to like tell the user what browser you should go and download to use this website, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Nobody would do that now. But a lot of people would proudly have a thing at the bottom of their website that said, like, this was built using Notepad.
Yeah, right. Because it shows you actually have to know the code to do that, right? There's no IDEs to do it. So yeah, from building from
Yeah.
scratch. Right. Yeah, I had a few years where I did that as well. So it was actually I do make my students use Notepad++. I'm
Yeah.
pretty mean about with starting off because like you got to at least know the basics. And after that,
When I started, I had the way that I got into it. I don't know if I'm jumping ahead if we were going to talk about this, but we're talking about it now.
Yeah, go ahead.
When I was in high school, I had a band and I wanted to have a website for my band so that I could just tell people when we were going to play at different clubs next. And I approached one of my best friends in high school who was kind of one of the computer guys, like one of the nerds in school. And I was asking him, like, how do I make a web page? And I had shown him, I found all these tools. I remember one, there was Front Page and Dreamweaver, I think. There was one that I thought looked pretty feature rich called Hot Dog Pro, which was like an HTML editor. And so I was showing him like all these different software programs that you would like click the P button and it would insert a paragraph for you. And it was WYSIWYG, it hid all the code from you. And so I was asking him, like, which one of these do you think is best? And he said, man, just learn the markup. It's pretty easy, Instead of clicking the P button, you put a couple angle brackets with a P in the middle, It's pretty simple. And then, I just kind of learned from there. So, I totally agree. Start in Notepad. Learn the code. It's not that scary.
It really isn't. Yeah. All right. So now you're working at Airbnb. So what are you doing there?
Yeah. So I run what I consider to be the coolest team in the company. We are an internal product team. The employees at Airbnb, it's going to sound cheesy, but trust me, it's kind of not. We refer to the employees, Google has the Googlers, I think. I don't know what the Amazon people are called, but we are called the AirFam. We talk about AirFam a lot.
Okay.
And so our team is called AirFam Products. We build products for the AirFam. And I started that team 3 years ago with another engineering manager. And the reason that we started it and that I was excited about it was I'd always worked at really little companies where we didn't need internal tools. You just shout across the room, hey, what's the password for this? And somebody shouts it back, really, really low tech. And working at Airbnb, when I joined, there was, I think, 3,500 people. And it was clear that there was room there not to just build tools for our hosts and for our guests, but to also build tools for ourselves. And I think the feedback loop is really tight there. You build something and somebody tells you, I don't like this, or I can't get done what I used to be able to do because you changed this part, or bringing us suggestions like, it would really help me if I had a tool that did this. And then we say, great, and we can just work together on it.
Right. So what kind of tools are you building for the AirFam?
Yeah, so we have a few main tools. The first is what we call OneAirBnb. It's our internal website. And this hooks up to lots of different services and exports data to other services. And essentially, at its most basic, it's a people directory. You can see who everyone is. You can see profile data, whatever people wanted to share. We also are the source of truth inside Airbnb for what teams exist. And you would think that would be taken care of by like HR or something, but it's really not. Things change quick. Joe, Nate, and Brian, who started Airbnb, they were just 3 friends and started like having this weird idea of like, let's have people come sleep at our house. And it quickly grew into this big thing. And they still think of themselves as like the 3 friends, doing things real quick. Like, we can do anything. And so things change really quick inside Airbnb. So I think HR wouldn't be able to keep up with what teams exist. So we've built this tool that's sort of self-reporting, kind of going back to my days at Wikia, where we have contributors to the site. It's really user generated. So it's kind of AirFam generated. And so it makes it really easy to see what teams exist. And then we like to say that when people and teams get together, they produce work. And so every team owns different pieces of the company. And so details are provided there. And it makes it easy if you're trying to figure out like who owns this part of, the search page. You can just go to OneAirBnb and easily discover who that is.
Okay.
So that's one set of tools. We also have a site that does developer documentation. We have a Chrome extension. So every time you open a new tab, you get company news and, before you're, take off to go do whatever you were going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the types of tools that we build.
All right. Nice. Now, so this this app you build for everyone, like with the teams, and is that based on Wiki technology? I mean, did you take some of what you've learned from there, or is this a little different?
It's not. The spirit of it is there. I pushed pretty hard internally to democratize a lot of this information.
Mm-hmm.
That there are some folks, and there are some parts of the company that really do need to be locked down and can't be user generated. And the type of data that we're providing is really perfect for user generation. Like I said, things change a lot in the company, and you don't want to have that change communicated up to the top and then have them put it into some people management system and have that rebroadcast down to us. Like, it just doesn't work. And so I'm always kind of carrying that flag of saying, like, how about we have anyone edit this page? And then we meet somewhere we always end up meeting somewhere in the middle, like, okay, why don't we define roles where there's people who are like leads of this page and then they can edit. And so that's where we are now. But I'm always kind of pushing it toward, we've seen zero evidence of any kind of abuse. We don't see anybody creating fake teams just because it would be funny.
Yeah, right.
Everyone honestly wants to produce accurate content. So if we have some restriction about who's allowed to edit, that only just prevents the ability to surface that information.
Gotcha. All right.
So it doesn't use any wiki software, any wiki backend, but there's some of that DNA in it, I guess.
Gotcha. Yeah. Nice. Very cool. And so, right now we're in, I guess, mid-July, July 13th. And so, obviously, pandemic.
I just mailed my taxes. Yeah.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Actually, that's.
Yeah.
I'm gonna think that. I don't know if we have.
Get on it.
No, we have an accountant doing something with that. Anyway, we're in the middle of a pandemic here, and how has that impacted your role, if at all?
Well, Airbnb has been impacted quite a bit.
Yeah.
So we are a global travel company, and
there's no travel. Yeah.
Well, it turns out that that's not quite right. There's certainly a huge hit on global travel.
Right.
But we are seeing a lot of interest in people wanting to do nearby stays.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of, I was just talking to a friend yesterday who also worked at Wikia with Aaron and me, and he was saying that he just got back from spending 2 weeks at an Airbnb in Oregon. And it's classic because he's European and he's the kind of guy who would like go back to Europe for some time off, but no, he's going to Oregon because he could just drive there and stay. So for the company, there's been that impact, and Airbnb also unfortunately had to lay off 25% of the AirFam.
Wow.
And we moved quick we used to, when somebody would leave the company, we would just delete all of their like internal profile data. Or we move it to a state where like it wasn't, it wouldn't come back if the person rejoined. And so now we've changed that. So when one of these employees is rehired, everything will be restored and visible. So we kind of had to change our plans a little bit on the team to accommodate that work. We also worked on this external talent directory. So when we had to lay off 25% of the AirFam, we put up a page at airbnb.com/talent, and that was kind of showing off all the people that we were unfortunately saying goodbye to, but saying these people are, they're good. Amazing. Yeah, right. Hire them. So there was a lot of attention around that. So we were able to contribute to that effort. And my team was impacted. I lost two of the five engineers
Hmm.
on our team. And we also pivoted to like providing a lot of like surfacing resources that were being aggregated around the company. So you now have parents that were formerly in the office and their children were at school, or their children had nannies or some other after school
Hmm.
care setup. And now suddenly the parents are at home, the kids are at home,
Right.
nannies can't come over because of the pandemic, and so how do you provide resources to these folks to help them like kind of cope with this new situation? So we did a lot of promotion of that type of content, and we also we still might do it now that we're not all working in offices. We're likely going to spin up something that you can show off, sort of like your home office. I live in San Leandro, California,
Hmm.
which is maybe a 30-minute drive from San Francisco,
Hmm.
in like COVID traffic, meaning no traffic.
Hmm. Right.
So allow people to kind of show off like where they are. And I think that if you surface data like that, it makes people feel more connected. Like, oh, I didn't know that I live real close to Jimmy. Like maybe we should,
Okay.
maybe we should meet up, 6 feet apart and
Yeah.
have
Right. Right.
coffee or something. Yeah. So, so yeah, we've changed things a little bit. The company's guidance to us has been just stay the course and continue building the tools that you were anyway. But we're always looking for those opportunities where we can do something unique that's going to help people through this.
That's very cool. Yeah, and that's interesting. I haven't really talked to too many people. I mean, I guess one of my previous guests is currently in the midst of being laid off from IBM, and so she's having to deal with that. But yeah, it's as far as businesses go, there's quite a few that have been impacted worse than others. And I guess Airbnb's usually I would thought a lot of tech companies have done fairly well, but Airbnb's in one of those situations where you deal directly with the travel industry, and the travel industry's been pretty much decimated. So
Yeah, in a lot of ways, we don't think of ourselves as a tech company the way that others
okay,
do. Like everything with Google happens on the internet. Use
yeah,
Google search or use Google Maps or whatever. It all happens on the internet. Same with Facebook. It's like you're on the internet doing stuff.
right, right,
Amazon, you're buying things on the internet. Airbnb only uses the internet just to set up the initial arrangement, and then everything else happens offline.
right.
I go travel to another city. I meet a host. I'm welcomed into their guest house. I go do a cooking class. On the in the East Village or something. There's
Right.
everything is happening offline. We only use the internet just to initially connect people, to build up the trust profiles and do payments.
Now, have you used Airbnb much?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I was just telling somebody yesterday that one of the first times we used Airbnb, my girlfriend and I were in Amsterdam, and we stayed on a houseboat. A
Mhm.
floating houseboat right on one of the canals. And it was just such this authentic experience. And so we would get up in the morning and have breakfast, and we'd sit up on the deck at this little table,
Nice.
drinking coffee. And the tour boats would go by, and all the tourists were taking
Taking pictures of
pictures
you.
of us like authentic Dutch people
That's right.
having breakfast at our houseboat. So we thought that, and that was before I worked at Airbnb, and I thought this is a really, really cool way to like immerse into
Sure. Yeah.
a
Yeah.
different world. It's way better than sitting on the 10th floor of a hotel with a room that faces the air conditioner.
Yes.
you know,
I know what you
there's
mean.
some pipes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My family and I have used it multiple times and really enjoy it. So,
I also have to say that not to be such a salesman, but during this pandemic, the experiences team quickly pivoted to do online experiences
hmm.
where you can use Zoom to dial in to do an experience with an experienced host. And my girlfriend and I did a salsa making class,
Huh.
and I think it was $9 per person or $10
Right.
something. And it was a woman in Mexico who previously had an in-person salsa making experience, but she just gave us a shopping list ahead of time. We went out to the store and got everything and came back, and it was really an amazing experience. She would say, pour a little water in, and you'd say, well, how much? And you'd hold up the thing, and she'd say, keep going. Okay,
That's my
stop there.
soup.
That looks good. That's the right consistency. And you can't get that feedback from like a YouTube video.
Yeah.
Am I doing this right? Can you take a look at my pan and
Yeah.
are they
Yeah.
roasted enough? Yeah. So anyway, I've made salsa probably 10 times since
Nice.
doing the class. Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah. I can't wait till my tomatoes and peppers come in so I can make some of my own. Right. Very
There you go.
excited.
If you need a lesson, I've got your hookup.
Nice. Yeah. All right. All right. So, what kind of technologies do you use? I think you mentioned a few, but what are you currently using to like
Um,
develop the code? And well, it sounds like you're doing more of the managing, but what about your engineers? What do they do?
Yeah, so we started kind of a unique stack inside of Airbnb. Airbnb started as a Ruby on Rails monolith. So when I first joined the company 4 years ago, all the code for the website was just in this one big project, and the deploys were sort of crazy because each deploy that would go out had 30 or 50 changes, and everybody would have to like verify that their change worked before the train rolled, and then there'd be one error and you'd roll it back. So anyway, the rest of Airbnb has moved to like a service-oriented architecture
Okay.
where now there's all these different code repos, and then it all comes together. And those services are mostly being done in Java
Hmm.
or in Kotlin. And
What was that last one?
ours, Kotlin,
Kotlin. I'm not familiar with that. Okay.
yeah, it's a different language, but it runs on the JVM, the Java Virtual Machine, so
Okay.
you can use like the same containers to run both code.
Gotcha.
But our stack, there is a guy on our team who is very brilliant and very front end, and JavaScript can run on the server side using Node.js.
Right.
And so he brought the idea to our team of why don't we use Node.js? We're both very front end focused. We can run Node on the server. We can do server side rendering. We can use JavaScript in the client. And so we said, yeah. So we started our tools on JavaScript, React as the front end framework. We use Apollo, which is a GraphQL client and server,
Okay.
and we use GraphQL as the API, and MySQL as the database. I kind of rattled through a bunch of stuff. Does any of that need clarification?
um, well, no, at this point, I think that's good. You could probably spend. I think if you go too much more detail, you'll lose a lot of people. So,
I'll say this much, and I'll say it
yeah,
in a way that hopefully doesn't lose anybody. Look into GraphQL. GraphQL is awesome.
GraphQL.
Yeah, with REST APIs, more traditional APIs, you have to set up on the server that a certain endpoint is going to return a certain set of data. So if I wanted to query information about you, I might set up a profile or an endpoint that says return the first and last name. And when you call that endpoint, I get your first and last name, and that's it. But now if I also want your email address, you have to set up yet another endpoint. It's like the first name, last name, and email address endpoint, which is stupid. So GraphQL just lets the client just query whatever data it wants. It says, give me Professor Drake, and I want the first name, the last name, the email address, the city. Give me all that, and it returns it. So GraphQL is great if you're looking into building an API. That's what you want.
Cool. Very cool. So I know in your previous life before Airbnb, you developed tools for eBay sellers, correct?
Yeah.
How does that help you with your current position at Airbnb?
Um, I've found that through my career, I've always ended up working with really interesting communities of people. So in the late 90s, people that had all this like junk in their house, they were suddenly empowered with this platform to be able to sell it and connect to buyers who were looking for these obscure things. And I went to a lot of eBay conventions, and face to face meeting the folks who were buyers and sellers. We had one guy come over to our office once. This was probably in probably in early 2000. And I remember this guy came in and he was the wackiest guy. We brought him in for like a user study or something, and he was dressed like a train conductor, with like a vest and like a hat. And he was the things that he sold on eBay were um, pens, pipes, and whistles. That was like his
Insane.
thing.
Yeah.
And we were like, pens, pipes, and whistles, really? And he said, yeah. And he pulled out a whistle and blew it, and it was the loudest, sharpest whistle. And we were sick of the guy, but it was just hilarious. That's the type of folks that you would end up getting connected to through eBay.
Yeah.
So anyway, then I did stuff with Bitcoin, which is another fascinating community of people, and Airbnb is a fascinating community of people.
Right.
The idea that you would welcome someone into your home seems somewhat radical to others, and that's looking back on my life and the areas in which I've worked, I've realized that I've always ended up working with these unique communities of people. So eBay also has that two-sided marketplace. There's the sellers and the buyers. Airbnb has the hosts and the guests.
Right.
They each need a unique set of tools. You bring people together to do something. In eBay's case, it's to do a transaction. In Airbnb's case, it's to share an experience. And so I think that there's a lot of similarities, both in how the company is structured, to have teams that are building host tools versus guest tools. A great search is required for both. So it seems really, really familiar. It's like, putting on an old baseball glove, kind of.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, tons of similarities there.
Very cool. All right, so now it's time for a hard question.
Oh.
So think of it. I'd like to think about a time where you've had a hard problem that you had to deal with throughout your career, or some sort of sticky situation. Tell us a little bit about that situation. What was your thought process during it, and how did you resolve it, or what was the outcome?
Well, I've been pretty lucky that I've worked with really great people through my career. So I've never really run into any personnel issues. Now as a manager, I tend to think through those things more often than like technical issues. But I could share a pretty difficult tech issue with
Yeah,
you.
please. That'd be great.
When I was at Wikia, so Wikia was started by Jimmy Wales, who started Wikipedia. And Wikipedia, of course, is the massive database of factual information. And Wikia was more fan-based. We'd have Harry Potter wikis where people would just catalog all the data you could think of about Harry Potter. They were totally separate entities, but they operated on the same back-end code. It's this code called MediaWiki.
Right.
And so we would get together, us from Wikia, we'd get together with people from the Wikimedia Foundation to talk about that software and help develop it. And the editing was always pretty tricky for wikis. When you go to edit a simple page, you just want to correct a typo on Wikipedia. Hey, I want to contribute to this. I'm going to fix that typo.
Right.
So you hit edit, and you're faced with this wall of like really crazy looking code. And that's not a good experience. So we were both at Wikia and at the foundation trying to develop a visual editing tool that would let you just simply, like Google Docs, just highlight a word, change it, easy. And they were building a technology very similar to Google Docs. Google Docs is not really HTML. You're not really editing HTML, you're editing a series of characters that then gets rendered. Of course, it uses HTML to render it, but like the cursor that blinks on Google Docs, that's just a div that just turns on and off. And when you move the arrow keys, it's not really stepping through the letters. It's measuring the width of each letter and moving that blinking element. It's pretty strange technology. And the foundation was using that as the basis of their editor. And we realized at Wikia, a lot of people had used CSS to style their wikis. So they had all these different colors, different fonts, different sizes of text. And what they were building was definitely not going to work for what we needed to use. And I ended up coming up with the idea of using this technology called content editable. It's a property that you can set in HTML that gives you a real cursor. And when you use the arrow keys, it really steps through. But it's terrible in that when you put your cursor in the middle of some text and press enter to make two paragraphs, each browser would take that command and do something different with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I ended up doing was using content editable and just turning off all of its decision making. When you pressed enter, we would receive the event that someone pressed enter when the cursor was here, but then we would transact with the visual editor's data model to say, at this offset, somebody pressed enter. Why don't you figure out what to do and tell us what the markup would be after the fact? And so anyway, that also opened us up to being able to do mobile editing where you use a very different type of text selection with your finger. And anyway, we got together and showed it to the guys at the foundation, and we completely changed the way that they were building. And then we were able to build together and get there faster. And so that's the editor that's now live on Wikipedia.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was tough. It was really tough at the time. It was kind of a straightforward solution, but sometimes you get too focused on wanting to build one solution. It's kind of nice sometimes for an outside influence like me to come in and say, look, I figured out this step, and then we could adjust from there. So that was a big thing. It was a pretty there were a lot of resources given to that project, and it helped out Wikipedia and it helped out Wikia. It was like a good marriage, instead of the two separating and doing their own type of editor. We just did one good one.
So does that give you a little bit of, I don't know, pride when you go to Wikipedia and know that some of the functionality is part of your code or thinking, and that helped make that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's all these little bits throughout the internet that you run into, and you're like, oh, I remember I designed that.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I built that. It's kind of neat. It takes you back. It's like seeing your yearbook all over the place, for all these different things that you did.
So,
yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds cool. All right. So, all right, what about your career? Sounds like you've had a very interesting career. What was kind of the hardest choices you've had to make throughout?
I'm not very good at making choices, like career choices. So my dad just had like the same job forever, as far as I could tell as a kid. Like, just dad went to work, you knew what time he was leaving, you knew what time he got home. And that was sort of my frame of reference. So I tend to do that as well. So like I've stayed at companies for way longer than I should have, just because I was uncomfortable with the idea of like, like go do an interview, like convince somebody that I'm good enough for them. And then even to, I've never even had too much of a clear direction of like, that's the company that I want to be at. So I don't know, I've sort of drifted through life somewhat, and it's always just sort of worked out. So I would encourage anyone listening to trust in that system as well. There's really something to be said for planning out, your career, making smart, savvy business decisions. But, look, you don't have to. You can also just sort of fumble through this whole thing, and it'll be okay.
Well, I mean, and imagine part of that is you also just have a great work ethic. And so once people see what you can do, they appreciate it, and you do fine. Whereas
I think that's true.
If you applied that same strategy to the actual work itself, it may not work out quite as well.
Oh no, you can't. No, I'm pretty tenacious when I work.
Yeah.
But as far as any sort of like when you asked me for a resume, and I told you that I just don't have one. And my LinkedIn still doesn't even say that I work at Airbnb.
Yeah.
So if anyone's trying to look me up and you found Christian Williams on LinkedIn, but it's not the Airbnb guy, don't worry, that's me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just don't care. I just don't really care to build that up and to, be really, I work with folks who are like, okay, I'm going to work here for 4 years and I'm going to get this much stock, then I'm going to switch to Google and I'm going to do this and I'm going to invest that. I think that's really cool that they can do that, but I just don't have any interest in it.
Yeah. No. Hey, man, if it sounds like it's working for you, so
Yeah, it's okay. It's hard to. I guess the only thing that I could say is just make decisions where you end up working with great people.
Hmm.
I've always ended up working with great people. And if you find yourself in one of these situations where there's some toxic environment, just get out of there. Like just quit. You'll find something else. It'll be okay. Um, there's no reason to put yourself into that position.
Yeah, I've been in one of those before, and I agree with you. You know, it's better, and that's one reason why I love working where I am, because I got a great group of people I work with, and I love it here. And
Good.
it would take a lot of money to convince me to move, and even then, I
I
don't
see.
know.
They're listening right now, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if they are not, I don't care.
It's the truth, huh?
Yeah, it's the truth, and I can't be scared of the truth. So, well, well, that was good, because I was going to ask you at the very end if you had any advice for students today, especially in this difficult job market. What can they
Yeah.
do to, get themselves ready, or make themselves marketable, or whatever they can do?
It's tough. I would say, and also, I only have my point of view, really. I've only lived one life. I know other people's stories as well, but for me, just I think the most important thing is just find something that you're truly interested in. Um, Back when I started this, nobody was like, I don't know if there were college classes on programming. Um, I just sort of fell into it backwards, and I just didn't have any other options in my life, so that's what I was doing. And it turned out to be this like lucrative career of like high paid tech work or Silicon Valley thing. And now I think kids are growing up and they're seeing that that's a thing. And so they're choosing to go to college and enroll in these, software development classes. And, so I'm seeing a lot of people come fresh out of college and come into Airbnb. By the way, they're way smarter than I am. It's incredible, the young folks that I work with, and some of them are, you can tell, really engaged and excited about technology and about building great products and
Mhm.
building things that are going to change the world and connect people. That's really cool. There's a smaller set of folks that I've seen, or my impression has been that they know that this is a good way to get lots of cash. So study this, be real savvy, come into a company for a certain number of years, get that stock, get out, move to somewhere else. And I don't know, that doesn't motivate me.
Mhm.
That's not how I feel good about myself. So I think it's important for people to just know what interests them, what motivates them. You don't have to choose a career just because you think that's the only way to like succeed through life. Just choose like whatever resonates with you.
Mhm.
And if you don't know what it is, that's okay, because life is long and you'll fumble your way through it,
Yeah, right, right.
and everything will be okay. So I think the worst to do is to put yourself in a position um, where you're doing things for not the right motive.
That's great advice.
That, that's my advice. And use GraphQL and use TypeScript.
Right, 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 right. So,
Um, yeah, and I don't know, just find cool people that you want to connect with. Don't piss anybody off, because the tech world is small.
hmm.
You're going to end up working with these people again at another company. Just be cool, be engaged, be excited, be willing to learn, keep your eyes and ears open. Um, just show it with a good attitude, and
Hmm.
things will be fine.
Very cool. Great advice. And thank you very much, Christian. I think that brings us to the end. So I appreciate.
No,
Oh no,
oh,
you
this
want
is so
more?
much fun.
You're loving it.
Yeah,
Let's
I
see.
am.
I don't know if I can think of any more questions off the top of my head.
No, it's
Um,
fine. It's fine.
no, you're good. You're good. Well, I think most of the people who are still watching, they're probably at the limits of their abilities to keep.
Yeah, I get that a lot. It's
Yeah, yeah. So
understandable.
as much fun as it is, you got a great sense of humor, and it seems like you're a really easygoing guy. So it's awesome. So, but anyway,
Well, thanks a
thanks
lot.
again. But we appreciate you joining us.
Right on. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome. And